I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 7:01 now. I think we've got one more board member we're waiting on. Thank you, everybody, for joining what is our virtual meeting of the Board of Education. I'm going to call this meeting to order and provide an explanation. So the meeting was traditionally styled as a special meeting because it's an online meeting. It's actually going to be an emergency meeting. We had a technical issue at the time the notice was posted on our website on Friday night, and the weekend doesn't count. So we're going to do an emergency meeting tonight. Obviously, notice went out to parents. Notice was posted on our website, was shared with the town clerk, in addition to being in the newspaper and shared by the PTAs. And we've got 500 attendees on right now, so I think people got the message. It's obviously legitimate need for an emergency meeting here, given that the parents and community needs to know about the return to school and the imminence of that. We got an opinion from the town council who spoke with the Connecticut Freedom of Information Agency, who recommended that we go down this path. So I just wanted everybody to know that at the outset. So this is an emergency meeting. We'll be sticking to our agenda tonight. With that, I'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So Mike, if we could bring up the flag. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mike. All right. Can we get a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So I'll second.
Mr. Kelly, and a second from, I think that was Miss Downey.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda, we'll do a roll call vote. Bernstein.
Peter, point of order.
You missed the start, Peter. We've already moved on. There's a motion on the table to approve the meeting agenda.
Peter, you can't ignore a point of order.
Go ahead, Peter.
Go ahead, do whatever you're going to do.
There's a motion on the table, Peter, but go ahead.
I raised a concern, and I think you know about it, that the meeting we're having needed more notice. It's not properly noticed under Connecticut FOIA. Obviously, I don't want the meeting I don't necessarily want it not to continue, but I think it's really important that it's registered as a point of order that this meeting may not be in order. And I think you've indicated that you have opinions from the town attorney and from the Connecticut FOIA Commission that we can have this meeting. And I'd like to be sure that those, whatever opinions you've received that allow us to continue are attached to the meeting minutes, so that we don't have an issue later with this meeting. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, under Connecticut law, it's necessary to notice public meetings 24 hours in advance. And this meeting was noticed in a shorter time than that.
So Peter, I did cover that at the outset. I saw your email at 6 o'clock. Obviously, the town attorney has not responded to the email, but I will get that opinion circulated. We certainly can post that. She spoke to the same person at Connecticut FOIA that you did, and they agreed together that an emergency meeting was proper in these circumstances.
Okay, because we just talked to the town attorney, and he came to a little bit different opinion. He's glad to join the meeting to hear it, but if you think you've got it covered,
I've spoken to Abby Wadler today, and that was the recommendation. So if you'd like to appeal the ruling of the chair, feel free to make a motion, Peter. Otherwise, we're going to move on. All right. Then with that, we've got a motion on the table to approve the meeting agenda. So that was made by, I believe, Mr. Kelly, seconded by Ms. Downey. Bernstein is a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
And Mr. Scher?
Yes.
Thank you. I do want to note a couple things at the outset. One, I think this meeting was capped at 500 attendees. Mike, if you can confirm that. If that's the case, we want to make sure this recording goes up as soon as humanly possible. And Tony, I'm sure you'll send a link based on whatever the outcome is of the meeting tonight.
Peter, might I make a
no?
recommendation? It's Karen Hirsch.
Yes, Ms. Hirsch.
If there's multiple people from the same families that are signed in as participants, to watch, maybe some of them could share their computers or phones so that other attendees that are trying to access it can.
Peter, can I just ask?
Yes.
When we started the town halls, I bumped our account to 1,000 because, as you know, we did have a town hall that got up to 900. I just want, Mike, could you confirm, are we still okay with 1,000 tonight?
We are, our license is for 1,000 for meetings, and we are currently at 500 for webinars. This is a webinar.
Okay.
If we are able to up it behind the scenes during the meeting, we will attempt to do that. But I can't guarantee that once a meeting starts, you can make that change.
All right. And Mike, how quickly can you get the recording posted?
I will, depending on the length of the meeting, I will do my best to get it up tonight, if not very first thing in the morning.
Okay, great. And again, Dr. Jones, I'm sure you'll communicate that link out to the community. All right, so the meeting will be posted on our website in its usual spot. We also have our YouTube channel. People could go there. The agenda obviously is found on our board docs website. All the usual caveats that go with this. So with that, I'm going to go right to the discussion item, Dr. Jones, COVID-19 staffing updates and challenges. And I just want to remind board members, we are very limited to the agenda items tonight, especially as we're doing this as an emergency meeting. Just something about the emergency meeting. Any votes taken tonight, the record of it will be up on our website and shared with the town clerk within 48 hours. Minutes of the meeting will be shared with within 72 hours with the town clerk and our own website. All right, with that, Dr. Jones.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bernstein. First of all, I think because there are 500 people on here, I do want to say we're in a better spot today than we were last Thursday and Friday, which is fantastic. And, you know, the call for people in the community to, you know, send the information that went out Friday to their neighbors and daughters. And we have 88 people who applied for long-term sub just in the last, since Friday. We have 112 people who applied, and really high quality candidates for monitors. We also have the long-term elementary subs. We had 13 of those. So the applications are coming in, and it's going to make a difference for us in feeling more secure. The other thing I just want to mention is we did onboard, and I don't know if Shemaine has that exact number. At one point, I think it was around 44 brand new teachers. So it's not like we haven't been hiring this summer, but during COVID, there are many different factors that are taking place. Everything from 7 resignations just within like the last two or so weeks. We've had our FMLA exempt. Those meetings, as we meet with teachers on medical exempts, those teachers we have to deal with individually. We had 28 of those. We also had just the 10 long-term subs, and generally we would have, even in our building subs, about 22 of those. We were down to 14, and the 14 don't actually want to be the type of, out of the 14, only 6 really wanted the same type of position they had last year. So I share that with you. We're in a much better place. We're doing everything we can to get our doors open. For the 9th, 8th is orientation, and a special thanks also to Chief Heavey, who is making sure that as we're filling these positions that we can get people fingerprinted in the evening. Normally we have to schedule that, but he's really partnering with us as well, and his staff at the police department. So we're in a much better place, and I'm glad to be able to say that, but I felt like we couldn't wait until the middle of this week. And if we hadn't done what we did on Friday, I think it would have been challenging. The other thing that happened last week, which is different for all of the districts in Connecticut, is an interpretation of the COVID FMLA. I'm going to call it intermittent leave, but it's the qualifying reason why they can take leave. And what's happening for us is we're one of the only school districts that are going back in full. And so if a teacher has a child in another school district, originally the ruling was as long as we could offer childcare, well, I say the ruling, the interpretation, if we could offer childcare, we believed that by making that offer, our teachers were okay. And we did have a childcare option. Boys and Girls Club were very gracious, worked with Greenwich Public Schools so that it was $24 a day, very reasonable. But at first there were about 24, 25 people that were interested. By the time it got down to it, we only had 2 teachers that actually wanted the childcare. So we had to cancel that piece. But if a teacher requests FMLA leave as of last Wednesday, and they want to be off when their child's on hybrid. So if their child is in hybrid and they're at home Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, the teacher can take leave Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for a full 12 weeks. So we're also working through some of those. And immediately we had at least 5 of those in the district that came very quickly. We're hopeful because it has a different pay structure. It's 2/3 of their pay for the first 10 of the 12 weeks that we can work with those teachers and help find solutions. So Shemaine and her team are doing a great job working through that. And again, that just emerged last Wednesday. So that's where we are tonight. And I'm grateful to the community for helping us get more applicants in the pool for some of these unusual leaves that we're dealing with. And I don't know, Shemaine, if I missed anything.
Shemaine, you're muted.
I said, Tony, can you all hear me? Tony, you mentioned everything that we discussed a little while ago.
Yep.
All right. I guess we'll move into discussion. So Tony, I guess if I'm hearing you correctly, you believe we will be able to start elementary schools on time next week and not need to amend the calendar. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. I'll turn it over to Ms. Stowe.
Okay, I just wanted to take a step back because obviously it was a long weekend for all of us. It was personally a huge amount of feedback from constituents over the weekend, parents, students, teachers, all of them wanted to stick to the plan and go back to school. The constituents in my house felt the same way. So I know that we had to, I guess, get that information out there. But the last minute uncertainty, of course, is not what anyone needed right now, because I know that there were a lot of people that were very stressed out over the weekend. I think the good news is that what we really did see is that 82% really wants to go back to school. And I think we heard a lot from them. And people are ready, kids are excited. And I have to say that I've heard from so many teachers that are also really excited. And it sounds like we've cleared the hurdle. Is a lot of that, 2 questions, I guess. A lot of that is because so many people in the community have come forward. And for that, I just think that's an awesome statistics. And I think that's what we need to hear right now is how the community has really stepped up. So I want to hear a little bit more about that. But more importantly, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? So what, if we could really talk about what really changed sort of in the last week, like what is the biggest issue, just so that everyone, I don't think anyone wanted to go through this undue stress. And I know, Tony, you certainly didn't want that to happen. It seems like it was just another hiccup now and otherwise a long summer. But if we could just walk through the biggest drivers, how we make sure it doesn't happen again, and then just one more time reiterate sort of the community that's sort of rallied around to answer this question, to sort of call of duty.
Yeah, I mean, I think the monitors are probably one of the best examples. We knew we were short 17 people to fill that role for us, and we had 112 people apply. So, you know, it's making a big difference. We also, I think, have, well, when you ask me about the school year, I think the whole year is going to be challenging, and that is just being honest. I think for every school district in Connecticut, because we can have teachers who test positive, or they don't even test positive. They were around somebody who was positive, and then they have to go home, likely for the full 2 weeks. If it's somebody in their family member, they're quarantining for 2 weeks, and we have to be able to backfill those positions. And, you know, I just look at the weekend, we had 4 more of positions that were like that in the district. We weren't anticipating when we went home on Friday, where they have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So this is going to be ongoing throughout the year. And we hope that, you know, you tend to think when you quarantine, if there was somebody that was positive, it might be a whole cohort of students so they could still learn online together. But we're going to have individual cases that we're going to have to backfill, I think, throughout the year. So now the good thing is we have a pool of people to help us when that happens. Because we needed to get that back up again. And some of our regular subs that generally will sub for us, just were not interested in coming back in this environment. So, and I think maybe when they see our teachers come back, maybe some of them will come back, you know, because if you're a substitute or you're a long-term sub who's certified teacher that can take over for stints, if you're not really feeling comfortable, you may wait and see if the opening is successful, and then you may decide you want to come back because it's optional work for them, where our teachers have to come back because they're under contract.
Right. Well, I did hear of a lot of people that said they applied over the weekend. I would have, but then I guess I couldn't keep this board job, and I think I have a few too many jobs going on right now. But I think, do you also find, are people from, if we need to, are people from Havemeyer going in? Like, are we thinking about everything?
I think if we have to go and sit in a classroom or do whatever we need to do, absolutely. We actually said that today.
Okay, good.
And I meant it.
Okay, good, because I think we really should try to stick to the 9th. It sounds like you're saying that.
Yeah.
But okay, I'll let other people go. Thank you.
All right, I can see the attendee numbers are jumping, so if anybody knows someone that has not been able to get in, let them know the technical issue's been fixed and they can log in now.
Yep.
With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Scherer.
Tony, I'm sorry, I must have missed a beat here. I'm generally not a stupid guy, but I don't even know what we're talking about. Meaning, I mean, we got called to this emergency meeting. I guess we're having, what is the problem? I mean, I could kind of discern the problem, but I'm not really hearing anything specific and concrete. So could maybe the other people know, but could you back up and explain this to me?
I think it's a multitude of different factors, and we have to be able to cover all of the different, whether it's a resignation, whether it's our long-term subs that did not, or building subs is probably the better word, that did not return.
Are you saying you don't have enough people to open schools? I mean, I'm not, you keep describing like a problem, but I'm not even sure I know what it is.
Yes, yeah, that's what I was saying, is that we didn't have enough people in the system to feel confident that we're going to be able to open the doors. And okay, I feel better today because we have a lot.
Could I back up? Could I back up? Because I like to deal in facts, that maybe I just need some base information. We have 900, and I always get the numbers mixed up, 15 or 51. I always get those two mixed up. I'm sure the number's different. We have 900 and something teachers in the system every year, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we turn over a certain number of those, the years that I've been on the board, which is now 10. It typically, we have 30 to 40 open hires, people who retire, get jobs somewhere else. Yes. New people are hired over the summer. I think I heard you say we have 44 new hires. So that sounds to me like it's consistent with the way that it's always been, right? So, and I think you told us at the last meeting that you had 27 people who, and I don't know how many we normally have during the year. I know during the year we normally have medical leaves and they're approved because someone has an issue, they're suffering some disease or whatever. So we have long-term subs, that's normal business. I understand this last meeting you told us we had 27 people who provided medical documentation that they would be on leave. That was known, I don't know, 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
So what new problem appeared specifically, and how many numbers and where and why that are different than what is our normal business at this time of year?
Well, this time of the year, normally we would not have a teacher who can take off Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. to stay home with their children for hybrid, and we don't know how big that could be. We don't usually have a teacher that resigns the day before teachers start.
Correct. Correct.
So, you know, we've had
So
that.
so how many of those do we, I'm sorry, just interrupts, just
Point of order.
too fast.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Kelly.
The board members asking wonderful questions. Thank you, Mr. Shear. I'm interested in hearing the answers. So if we could let the superintendent answer the question, it would really be educational to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
Joe, you will have an opportunity to ask your questions. I'm asking mine. So
Peter, he is correct. If you ask a question, please allow the superintendent an opportunity to respond.
What I'd like to know in each of the categories you're rattling off, how many of these we have and where is this problem?
So it's a multitude of problems. One thing is staffing the remote school. We have 22 long-term subs that we were going to use for that. Their positions. And out of those 22, you only had 6 who wanted to return. So that's one challenge. We also have, and that's again, because we had 500, then 700, and people can change their mind as often as they want. We also have 10 people who needed, that were having babies, and they might be leaving, you know, next month, or they might be leaving in 3 weeks, and we have to have a certified long-term sub in there. They have not been as easy. Now, I think as of today, those are filled. We also have teachers who are on medical exemptions, which would not normally be on medical exemptions. This is not a typical medical exemption that you would have on a normal public school a year. These people would normally be face-to-face teaching for us. So on top of these, we're also going to have more medical leaves. This is a COVID medical leave. And so with some of those, they have to reverse remote, or we have to drop the course. And I have talked about this in our return to learn, in our return to learn planning. And if it's a unique position, and I'll say like a world language teacher, then there has to be somebody physically sitting in the classroom. We needed 17 of those as of the end of last week. But again, these are all, they all add up. They're all different. And it's a different type of leave that, you know, we haven't dealt with most of this before. So I feel better though tonight, and that is the good part. You know, we're getting it done, and everybody's rolling up their sleeves, work through the weekend, and we're getting there. So it is not a typical year by any shape or form at all.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Hirsch.
Thank you for the update, Dr. Jones. I know you had mentioned, I guess one of the other things was that the state had just revised their FMLA plan to allow for teachers who have children in other districts that are going hybrid to only be able to teach part-time if they need to be home with their students. Do we have any staff members that are going to be able to possibly, if they can't teach full-time, but fill in as subs instead on days where they could be in the school? You know, I don't know what other options were offered.
Yeah, Shemaine's working with them on an individual basis. And some of them may be able to switch to a remote position, which could be helpful, like for elementary. But again, it's case by case. And that's one of the things when you're talking about HR, you can't have a group meeting. And on most of these issues, they're private. And a lot of these meetings, you know, I want to say Shemaine had at least 140, maybe even higher now, one-on-one meetings with people. It's, you know, it's at least an hour per meeting. So that's part of the challenge on some of these too, just getting through all of the HR, but they've done a great job. So yes.
You know, I just know, and I wanted to, you know, to thank you for, you know, the intense amount of work that you guys have been going through in the past couple of days. I know that from all the public comment, everybody really was very disappointed to think about the possibility that their students won't be able to start school on the first day. So I'm glad that we're in a position now to say that will not be the case, and that we've increase the number of robust subs and monitors that we've had. And I hope that they will be properly vetted, because we don't want anybody in the schools with our children that haven't been. But I think it's also important to note, because many parents who may not realize this, is that there's been a teacher and sub shortage in the country, and it's been documented for the past 10 years. The numbers of those people going towards their teaching degrees has dropped significantly over the past decade. So I know it is not always as easy to find incredibly fantastic qualified staff like we've always been able to do in the past, and especially so this year. But this is something that has been discussed and documented for a decade. So it's not about proper planning. It's about changes in what the state was requiring. Is that correct at the last minute?
It happened just last Wednesday, is the Monday, Tuesday, Friday. That was brand new. And they held a conference at the state level to share that new interpretation with us.
And then the last question that I had is, I know that the state does not allow visitors into, isn't wanting to allow us to have visitors in our schools due to COVID. So, I don't know what the protocol is for those who are applying to be subs or monitors, and how long it will take for them to have fingerprint checks and other documentation so that we have them as staff as opposed to somebody who's offering to volunteer, because I know we can't really have that. Is that?
Yeah, they have to be fingerprinted to be in a classroom with children without a certified person. So, and then we did have some parents that were, can I just come and volunteer and help out, which was wonderful. But they do have to go through fingerprinting and that process. But again, the chief is helping us with that, so, which is fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, Miss Olson.
Hi, Tony. Thank you. I have a couple questions, but first is, what is the deadline? You may have said this already. Was there a possibility that we'll have more teachers take leave or resign between now and then? Is that a possibility?
I think one good thing is that as we checked in with our principals today, we're finding that by the end of the day, the teachers were feeling so much more comfortable. I know, Mark, you were out at buildings and you were out. So I'm very hopeful that the leave that we see is going to be more COVID related because somebody tested positive, where they've got a family member that they have to look after. I don't anticipate after today that we're going to have like resignations.
Is there a deadline for leave or resignation?
They at any point in time. I mean, if a teacher wants to resign, they can resign. If they, somebody's tested positive, they can take leave. So they meet with HR and then we have to process those.
Okay. Because I know there was, I think I brought it up a couple of meetings back in last meeting about the possibility of a teacher and sub shortage with everything going on with COVID, in addition to what Karen Hirsch had said, which is absolutely correct, that there's already a teacher and sub shortage pre-COVID and now that it's exacerbated. So I feel like it's something that we could have planned for even further in advance. I have another question about the qualifications of the monitors and the subs. I know that they're getting fingerprinted and vetted, which is absolutely a necessity. But if anybody's going to be in the classroom, what we normally do with new paras or new teachers is some sort of new teacher orientation, new teacher training. Yep. I know, Tony, you know that in the classroom there's everything from classroom management to, it's a lot more than just being able to push a button and broadcast a teacher at home who's talking through a screen to the students live in the classroom if that teacher needs to be on quarantined or so what does that look like is my question. What does that teacher, that monitor, sub, new person in the classroom training, whatever that role may be called, how are they equipped to be in there?
They will have an onboarding, and Shemaine, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we have some people coming tomorrow to start the process with HR. So they start with HR, and then we'll make sure that we have planned PD. And that one of the great things about our professional development this year is so much of it was done virtually. There are recordings of fantastic things. They've done a great job with that, and it's a lot of on demand. So a teacher, like while they're finishing their paperwork, can actually access the on demand and get caught up of most of what the teachers did. For instance, like Thursday and Friday, they can get their COVID training. They can watch Q&A. Some of the meetings were actually videoed as well, so they can go back and watch staff questions. But we will get them onboarded appropriately, and Shemaine's office does a great job with our subs as well.
All right, Ms. Kowalski.
Sure. So, Tony, for those teachers that can be, that are subject to the hybrid component in a different district and their kids are home on certain days, and so they're going to be home Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for example, how many teachers, how many classrooms do we have in that context?
Right now, again, this just was issued on Wednesday, and then Thursday, I think it was Thursday, we had 5, and that's why we didn't know really what was going to happen. But Shemaine is working, I know, with working with those individuals to see how we can accommodate for that. And hopefully we can find a better solution than being gone Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. But we're lucky right now it's sitting at 5. And I think because it's 2/3 pay, that, you know, there may be people that aren't interested in that because childcare may be cost less than losing 2/3 of your pay.
Right, understand. Because here's my concern, and then I'll let you. It's more of a concern as opposed to a question. And I'm glad the number is just 5, but I certainly wouldn't want to be have a student in one of the 5. And here's why. My concern is you have a teacher that steps out 3 days out of the week, and then you have a substitute who doesn't have a teacher, who is potentially doesn't have a teacher certificate. How are we intending to maintain the continuity between in that classroom for the education of those kids, and I'm assuming it's elementary school, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, for that purpose, so that essentially it's a job share. So how are those teachers going to coordinate, particularly when you have a teacher with a certification and someone else who just has a college degree, but hasn't been trained as an educator? Because, you know, I have a college degree and above, and I can tell you right now, based upon last semester, I could not do this. So I'm just wondering, because I don't have the training. And so I'm wondering how we end up doing this, particularly if one of these, whoever's in this 5 situation, and it could grow, how we're going to maintain that, and how are parents in those classes going to be notified if their kids are subject to essentially a job share?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the honest answer. We haven't worked through it yet. Literally, the ruling changed on Wednesday. That's why we were having this meeting, just to make sure we were prepared, because if we did have more of those or a lot of those, then this week could look very different. But right now we feel good about the 5, and we're problem solving it. We have the same concerns that a parent would. And whether or not that is looking at a different role for that teacher, that instead of having those first 12 weeks, they do something fully remote for us. But again, Shemaine has to problem solve those issues one at a time with each teacher. And she's working on that right now.
Is it all elementary schools, or is it across the board where we have teachers that have parental issues?
I think it's at different levels, but it could be at any level. I mean, that's the 5 people. It's such a low number. I don't know. But it's one issue, and I hope it doesn't grow, and it didn't grow today. And again, I still think just getting back in school today was a great thing for us, just for people to overcome some of the fear, and maybe even having this extra week for people to problem solve their own childcare. Because the other thing that happened for many of our teachers this week are the districts that went full remote last week. So if you were in New York and you thought your kids were fully in school, all of a sudden Thursday and Friday, they were scrambling for childcare. And I will say they showed up today. I mean, the people we checked all of our absenteeism to make sure it wasn't high, and our teachers were here. We had very few exceptions where somebody just didn't feel comfortable coming to work. Our absenteeism was very, very low. So it was positive today. And I think getting through today is going to be helpful over the next 4 days. Our teachers are excited to be back.
And of our absentees, what were our numbers between who showed up versus absentee? And I think you had mentioned earlier that, most were, I can't remember the word, but I think it was, understood or fell within an exemption on absentees, but how many didn't? What are those numbers?
Yeah, I mean, it's so low. We have 900 teachers. I think we had, Shemaine, 17, maybe? 16. And out of those 16, 1 or 2 had unique situations for a personal day, and they'll still make up their training that they didn't. And actually, in some of the buildings, they were setting up the rooms today. And we have 1 or 2 that should have been at work, and again, HR follows up with those people. But 16 is very, very low. So we're optimistic that our teachers are they're ready to come back.
Okay, and I have one final question, because I think, obviously this kind of came about because we've got teachers that are now needing to quarantine because of one exposure. or travel to an area that now there's requiring their quarantining.
Yeah.
What happens? What will be the scenario if a teacher is exposed in quarantine and needs to quarantine, and it's determined that for some reason the students can still come to the class, but the teacher can't? Is that teacher then teaching via their kitchen, or are they going to have a substitute for 14 days?
Yeah, it depends. It actually depends on the situation. So, we have a handful of teachers right now who had to quarantine for the first week of school. And we know that. And we have another handful of teachers who recently tested positive that will be out for the first week of school. That's why the sub situation is so important. If the teacher is having mild COVID symptoms and they can still teach, then certainly we would absolutely welcome, and that's what we're calling the reverse remote, so that they can get started with their kids. If they're really, really sick, it's going to be just like on any other given year. It's just, it happens to be remote in that, you're going to have a substitute, and partnering. What the principals usually do, especially at the beginning of the year, they'll partner with another teacher as well. So we work with the principals on the best solution if somebody is if they're really sick and they're out. It happens to us every year during flu season.
Right. Understood. And I get that. But who's going to be essentially the monitor for subs when they come in and need to take over a class for a long period of time to make sure that the kids aren't watching movies and the education continues and that teacher can pick up to speed? Because I know there are, there are 850, I'm sure there are 850 parents on this particular chat who've known that their kids have come home and said, oh, it was a great day, it was a substitute, we watched movies all day. How are we going to make sure that that doesn't happen?
Well, I think it's the same that we do every year. The principals monitor the subs. We try to get high quality substitutes who are confident, especially if we know they can be out for a while. That's a certified sub. It's different than when a teacher calls in early in the morning. We didn't know they were going to be out. And the principals also have subs that they call on. They have the people that are used to being in their buildings. They know who to call on, and we have to establish some new relationships if we're going to have some new subs. But we also want to look at our sub pool, and we were just discussing that today because the pool is so much healthier now with so many people applying, that once they're vetted, being able to have teams of subs that are even within certain schools. And again, that's for that whole cohorting part, just because it makes a safer environment. But so we're working on all of that as the subs get vetted, the new subs.
And Mr. Bernstein, I'll release the floor in 1 second. I have one other question. I think, Tony, it would help for clarification based upon the email that went out on Friday asking for parent volunteers to serve as classroom monitors, and that you only need a high school diploma for those purposes. I think it would help if you could provide the community some guidance as to what those those classroom monitors are intended for, when they're intended to be used, and how, what is their utilization? Because I think there was a shock component that went out when getting that, to say who is going to be sitting in our classroom and why are they going to be sitting in our classrooms with our children, and where the heck are the teachers? That I think you need to put a finer point on.
Yeah, there were 3 different issues that were in the newsletter Friday, and there were some people that mixed them. So perhaps we could have written it better. Obviously, the monitors are, if we have a teacher that's reverse remoting, they basically start the computer so the actual teacher can come up on the screen. And again, most of these are in situations where, we would just have to cancel that course if we didn't have the teacher. It's a teacher who's on leave for medical reasons. It's a dynamic teacher, but we need somebody in the room, and it has to be actually somebody that's hired. We can't have just a volunteer, and we can't utilize positions even like a para, for instance, that we already employ by contract. They can't do that work, be in a room with students unsupervised without somebody who is certified in there. So the monitors are basically the person that has been hired to sit in the room while the teacher's actually teaching, because you have to have somebody physically present with the students. And that's different than, for instance, a long-term sub who is a certified teacher. They could be a retired teacher. We may need somebody for a month. We may need somebody for 3 months because they had a baby last April, and they're coming back in October and somebody needs to start that's different. And then there's just teachers in general. So if a teacher quit, the day before we started on Wednesday night, we need to replace that teacher. So there are 3 different buckets of positions. And
Right.
You're right. I don't think it was as clear as it could have been in the letter.
So it's right. It's those unique teachers in the sense that it's a specialty class, for example, as opposed to, it's not going to be our kindergartners and
No.
our younger learners, I should say, that are going to have a parent in the room while their teacher is remoting in.
Not unless a teacher was quarantined and throughout the day the teacher still wants to engage with the students through a Google Meets on the smart board, they could do that with a sub in the room, but they would have to have one of our elementary subs in there. That would just be keeping the connection more than anything. And again, we don't know what this whole quarantine thing is going to look like. I looked at the summer camps that Park and Rec ran this summer, and they went really, really well. I look at our workout groups at the high school where students really followed what they were supposed to do in social distancing. And, we had just one workout group of the many that we had, and it wasn't school related. It was something that happened, at a party. So overall, at least in Greenwich, our percentage is so low. I'm hoping that, the quarantine aspect won't be as challenging as what it could be, but we won't know until we start the year.
Got it. Peter, I'll let other people go. I'll circle back. I'll raise my hand again.
Thank you for that. All right, Mr. Kelly.
I'll just begin by saying what a great series of questions Karen Kowalski just asked her. She covered a lot of issues that I'd like to bring up. So thank you for that, Karen. It was great. Tony and staff, thank you very much for all the hard work you're putting in during these unprecedented times. Some people anyway, are justifiably a little bit nervous. These times right now, we need to project stability, we need to eliminate uncertainty, and we need to promote confidence. So it's really important that we dot our I's, cross our T's, and make sure we don't alarm anybody. So we have to let them believe and understand, and we do know what we're doing. So we have to let everyone understand that that's the case. In the very near future, there are tens of millions of children across the country that'll be going to schools. And in the first couple of weeks, it'll be very important, and it will tell us where we truly are with this pandemic. So those parents that are sending their most valued possession, their children, to schools, we need to make them feel good about knowing what we're doing. And we do know what we're doing, so we need to promote that. So continue the hard work. As I said, Ms. Kowalski did a great job with her series of questions. Thank you for that. And so all I have is a comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Scher.
I guess I just want to say, Tony, a lot of this, I agree with what Ms. Olson said. A lot of this is just normal. So when someone talks to me about pregnancies that are going to go out, I don't know what that has to do with COVID, as an example. So I think we're kind of mixing two things, and I worry that we're not adequately identifying what's normal business and what's different. And I don't know how to help you with that. But I think none of this is easy, but I think we need to be a little more careful, because a lot of this, when you tell me that there were going to be people who were not going to come back, there were going to be absences, there were going to be people who would take leave, I was kind of like, yes, of course. I mean, this is happening everywhere. It's fully predictable. It's what's happening in the private sector. It's been happening for months. I'm just a little concerned about our planning, that this is coming as a surprise or an urgent issue. When we talk about Family Leave Medical Act, and if you were to say to me, hey, wow, there's 30 people or 50 people who signed up to take advantage of that. More shocking is for purposes of staying at home with their own children. You know, that's a whole nother question. How do we wind up with a bunch of employees where this is where they're springing this on us at the last moment? I mean, there's something off in the way we're working with our employees if that's coming up that way, and we need to figure out what that is and make adjustments to that. But when I hear there's only 5, what I'm concerned about is that I give you guys a lot of credit for reaching out into the community to try to garner the resources to solve HR shortages and build our talent pool. I mean, hats off to you guys to do that. I have to tell you though, coupling that with, oh, by the way, I want to push back the start of school. That sent shockwaves through the entire community, and candidly, it ruined a lot of people's weekends. So, I mean, we've created essentially 3 days of unnecessary angst in the community by doing those 2 things together. And I think as we go forward, we have to learn from this. I thought we would have learned from this from the budget exercise in the spring. You know, we can't, we have to be thoughtful, more thoughtful as a board, supporting you, supporting the administration, that we don't do stuff like this that whips the community into a frenzy. We, as Mr. Kelly said, you know, we need kind of calm leadership dealing with these issues. I'm sitting here shaking my head at the end of this, that we've got 800 people, bunch who can't get on. They have tremendous angst about what they're going to do with their children and when schools were going to open. And I haven't heard a lot of data that, it feels like we pulled the fire alarm a little prematurely, particularly since we were going to have a meeting this Thursday anyway scheduled. The question that I have, so I give that to you as feedback and input, so in the future we don't do this kind of thing again. We always have to be learning and improving. The thing I wanted to ask though is, we're one of the few school districts that I know of, I think we're the only one, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I polled all 160 districts in Connecticut. But many of our peer districts in Fairfield County are not adopting the model that we're adopting. They are adopting a hybrid model, K through 12. And my question is, have you posed to the teacher union, if we had made a decision to go hybrid K through 12, what would that have done for the teachers who are concerned about coming back? Would this problem have been much less if we had in fact collaborated with them and said, hey, if we went to hybrid, with those of you who are absenteeing, those of you who are doing FMLA now, those of you who were going to take medical leave, would they have reconsidered that decision and we would have been in a better staffing position? And my question is, specifically, have we asked that exact question of the president of the GEA, and have they given us a precise answer from polling their the teachers that they represent?
Yeah, I mean, that's a challenging question, because I think it's a question where you could be at odds with what our community want. 82% of our families want their children back in school. And that is truly what we have taken the difficult pathway compared to most school districts in Fairfield County, definitely. I think in other parts of Connecticut, there are some school districts that are full return. They sent out a survey, I believe it was last week, and in last week it was still, there were about 40 to 50% of school districts that were still full return. 40 to 50% that had gone hybrid in Fairfield County. You're absolutely correct. They've either gone full remote like Danbury, Wilton, or they've gone to hybrid. And that poses a whole different set of issues that I believe was more important in the decision making, and that is for our families. And especially, I mean, we've spoken to this for our little ones that really struggle when we go remote, because when you go hybrid, children are remote 3 days a week. And for an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old that's, you know, or 5-year-old learning to read, so that, you know, we've come back. We had great response again today with our teachers. I think we're excited to be back in school, and we have really worked hard to utilize our buildings so that we can follow the guidance from the state.
So Tony,
so that's where we are. We really were focused on, you know, our full return for K-8 and feel like that's very important for the community.
I'm not suggesting whether or not we should be doing hybrid or not. I'm asking the question of, did we ask our employees if they would feel differently about coming back if we were hybrid? I'm not suggesting whether or not we do that. I'm seeking information. I think I hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the answer to the question is, no, we didn't ask the GA, and that's fine if we didn't.
No, we meet with GEA often, and you know, they've expressed, like, would we consider going hybrid? Could we do the hybrid Wednesdays? We've had all those discussions, but we take all of the inputs from the teachers, from the community, talking to the teachers about what can we do to help you feel more comfortable about returning. And we meet with GEA often and listen to their concerns, so we continue to partner together. And we've had a good relationship through this. And, you know, one of the things GEA has been asking for, they want COVID testing. We've been working for the last 2 weeks, and thank you to Mary Keller, trying to, you know, work with state representatives and local companies trying to get our testing. And we think this week we may be able to do that. That's a teacher request. Again, really nobody else in Fairfield County is doing that. So we are working together. Doesn't mean we always agree. You know, as school superintendent, I have to balance the needs of the teachers with the needs of the community. And ultimately, we're all here to serve the community. And 82% was a very strong voice in this community that they want their children in school.
All right. It's Peter Bernstein. I'll just speak for a minute and then I'll turn it over to the next speaker. I guess we need to recognize this is all different. There is no normal here. It's almost impossible to benchmark against a normal year. We aren't coming into it from finishing a normal year. That wasn't normal. We're definitely not going into it normal. But at the governor's press conference today, he announced 30% of districts are starting immediately in-person full-time. 28% are hybrid with a plan to shift to full-time in the near future. 40% are hybrid for the foreseeable future, and I guess about 1% are distance learning. Now, I did the math on that. I don't know. I've seen the governor's budget deficit. There's still 1% missing, so I'm kind of wondering where that went. You know, while I understand the consternation in the community from having this go out on Friday, the fact of the matter is, and we discussed at the beginning of the meeting, was there enough notice for the meeting? There's now 836 attendees. So I guess there was adequate notice. And thank you to those who persisted in dialing in while that issue was resolved. You know, there are a lot of people that want to return to school. If I take anything from the emails we received over the weekend, it is a validation that parents want their children to return to school. In addition to that, I've communicated with a lot of teachers. They do have childcare issues, and a lot of them are coming back despite those issues. I think the intermittent leave that just got decided last week is a really fascinating thing. It is next to impossible to sort out. How do you have somebody teach 2 or 3 days a week? I think that's just very, very difficult. So, you know, we have to understand that this was shared with the community because it needed to be discussed tonight in the event we did need to take action. Thankfully, we do not need to take action. That is the headline from this meeting, which is thanks to the community stepping up, thanks to the hard work of the administrators, thanks to those people willing to step up and teach and work in the schools, we will not be delaying the start of the year. So as frustrating as I know it can be, and it is frustrating, I'm extremely disappointed with the last minute decision-making going on by a few. And I want that to be very clear. It's a few compared to the large number of teachers we have. You know, they're coming back. They want to be with the students. And I think that we need to take that positive for what it is. All right, Ms. Downey.
Thank you, Mr. Bernstein, and hi I want to start with thanking Tony and Shemaine for probably what was a rough weekend, but appreciate and applaud your diligence and your efforts to really craft solutions to move us forward. I also, a lot of my questions already covered. I echo Joe's comment about giving the community consistency and information. And I also think Karen's questions were really good. Because I do share her concern that we're going to have, I don't like the job sharing concept. And to the extent these teachers can be accommodated with other positions, that we're not putting our students in jeopardy because they only have a teacher 2 days a week or the like. I do think, and I agree, the communication, given where we are in the world, it's as Peter was just saying, wasn't an end of year, was a great year. I think that's why I think communication to the community needs to be top notch at this point going forward, so that we don't give people a lot of angst or concern, or it isn't an unsettling time. So whatever we can do in our communication going forward, we can take a lesson from this and say, okay, read things, this is the lawyer me, read it 5 more times, or give it to someone else to read to be sure that there's no ambiguity or things that are going to cause concern. I just want to say, I think it's probably great that got the staff in there. Sometimes, it's like ripping the Band-Aid off. You just got to get into school, getting everybody into school and hearing that today was a really good day for the staff, and that they're feeling positive as a result, makes me happy. I think, it's unsettling, and sometimes just getting in the door is the solution. So following up that with 2 comments, if we do have teachers with these childcare issues, do we still have the option to provide them? Where we stand with the Boys and Girls Club? It could, like you said, they had capacity. We didn't have a lot of people who wanted it. Is there an opportunity to go back to them and utilize that space?
Yeah, the Boys and Girls Club was ready, and they have to hire, if they're going to bring in childcare. They're running a program for high school students right now because the high school is on hybrid. So for parents who have students who need to access that, it really would have to be, GEA coming together to see how many teachers now, maybe they're in a different situation. And I'd have to start that process again, but it would just be making sure we have, because it is changing, because all of these districts that go full remote, and 2 weeks ago they were fully in. It has changed for a lot of our teachers.
But we're at least availing ourselves of the Boys and Girls Club's very generous offer to share the space and do work for our students and if our staff, if it can be managed at this point, that's great to hear. The other question I had was kind of like an FMLA leave question that, okay, it's got all these provisions in there, and this, here's what the scenario is that somebody's in quarantine now, right, for a reason. They come back for 6 months, and then they're going to have to quarantine again. How does the leave manage that scenario? Because that's a conceivable scenario.
So, and I'm going to answer it, and then I'm going to turn it over to Shemaine. Shemaine, on the 80 hours, do you want to speak to that, the COVID FMLA? That's 80 hours.
Once the teachers have exhausted that leave, they're not able to access that FMLA anymore. Then we're talking about sick leave or something different.
Okay, so there's other mechanisms in place once that is exhausted, and that so that there's limits to what that provides in this specific circumstance. Yes. Okay, I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Hirsch.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to go back a step or two. I know, Dr. Jones, that you noted that especially with some of the newer hires for subs and monitors, that you're offering on-demand training. I just sort of want to see that how we are ensuring that our new hires are fully engaged in attending these trainings thoroughly, as opposed to, I just want to make sure, because I know the questions have been always in the past of making sure that we properly train and vet anybody that's coming into a school building to spend time with our children. So I just want to make sure that we're confirming and making sure that they have properly attended, all of the trainings that are needed.
Absolutely.
All right.
So you have ways to assure of that.
They actually, Mark, I'll let you speak to how they submit at the end on as they're creating products in the PD.
I was feeling a little left out tonight. Karen, thanks for the question. So over the weekend, we had Dr. Jones share with you a 4-minute video taking you through the comprehensive professional development calendar. Hopefully each of you took the time to look through that narrated presentation, where it clearly identifies that when a teacher logs into the training, there is a task that's required of each training module. And those tasks line the teacher up for future development of their remote learning Google Classroom. So it builds off of each other. So each experience builds off of one another, and it allows us to go in and see that the information has been ascertained and that the tasks have been completed.
Great, that's fantastic. So thank you for letting us know. And I just wanted to, the second question then would be also, if we're going to be bringing in building subs or monitors, we've been so specific in how we have worked out our cohorting model at the elementary level, at the middle level, and our hybrid model at the high school. How are we going to ensure that our subs that are coming in are properly cohorted so that we don't have them in and out of different buildings and different cohorts every single day or where they're needed, as well as with monitors?
The monitors are assigned to one space and they stay in that one space every day. So that one's a lot easier. The substitutes are going to work within a building or several buildings, just depending on how many subs we actually get through the system, get fingerprinted, get them ready, and then put them in groupings. Shemaine, I don't know if you had any more discussion, but we were just discussing that today. Feel free to chime in.
Our goal would be to assign our daily subs to select buildings. In the past, they've been able to choose which buildings they wanted to work at, with many subs choosing every building in the district, several buildings in the district. I think the best way to stay consistent with the cohorting is being open and honest and saying to individuals, if elementary is where your interest is, we are going to be assigning you to pull all jobs from this school or these schools to limit the amount of traffic coming in and out of our schools.
That makes me feel a lot better to know that we're not going to be cross-contaminating with subs and monitors. And I just wanted to point out, yes, today was the first day, I guess, that staff was back in our buildings. I stopped by the high school for something, and I had the opportunity to see many of our incredible staff members outside during lunch, fully masked, laughing, talking, socializing from a social distance, properly socially distanced, and all were really happy to be returning. And you just feel the incredible energy from all of our educators there and administrators who were coming out, making sure everybody was feeling good and happy. And it was a really wonderful sight to see. People were just really happy to be back. So I just wanted to share that. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to see it myself. So just seeing that made me exceptionally happy. So I'm assuming that any of our staff members that returned today probably had that same sense of joy. So just wanted to share that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Kowalski.
Sure, thanks, Peter. So just one comment and then two questions. I echo the comments that have been made about the need to be more mindful in setting off the alarm bells and how we communicate with the community. I think we just need to be sure of what we're communicating, how we're communicating, and providing even some more hardcore facts to understand where we are at, because this doesn't seem to me to be as certainly a big of issue as we thought on Friday. And I think you sent that we as a board and an administration sent shockwaves throughout the community that gave people heart palpitations over the weekend, myself included. And I think we can handle that better with how we choose to use our words and how we communicate. So I just echo that concern. It's not the first time we've sent fire alarms through the community too, and that happened along with the budget, which turned out to be just fine. On my two questions relate to SPED and then the rate that we're paying for our substitutes. The first is with respect to SPED teachers. Are we seeing an issue with those that are taking family medical leave or otherwise not coming in to make sure that we have an adequate source of teachers that teach special ed?
I don't know, Mary, if you want to take that, but we're still.
I can,
Here you go.
Shemaine can jump.
Yeah.
We've been working with our teachers. We've identified any staff member who has any concerns. We have substitutes for some of those teachers. We've also been able to redeploy teachers from one school, like to the remote learning school. So we've moved some people around to cover staff. We did know some of our teachers were going out on childcare and maternity. So we had been in the process of identifying subs for those teachers before this happened. So at this point, I believe right now, we're in pretty good shape. I think we have 1 or 2 maternity leaves that we're still trying to fill, but we are working diligently to make sure that schools have the staff they need and that we are able to provide appropriate staff to the remote learning students. Shemaine, anything else?
So, yes, yeah, so let me just drill down on that a little bit, Mary. So are we comfortable that we have enough SPED teachers as of today to cover all of our needs through the 15 schools in our district? Actually 16 schools, because now I'm going to include our remote school.
As of today, I think we're down 2 teachers because you may have noticed that we made some administrative appointments. And to the credit of our staff in Greenwich, they were Greenwich teachers. So when those teachers were moved into administrative positions, they created vacancies. But we do have an active list of people on our AppleTrack that we'll be calling in to fill those positions.
And of the substitute teachers that we're looking to make sure we have on hand, are those substitute teachers qualified to handle and fill the needs of our special ed teachers when in fact if they become unfortunate, if they become sick, which we all hope they don't, or are exposed to COVID? Do we have a pool of specific teachers that we can reach out to with respect to special ed?
No, we do not. Currently, of that pool of substitute teachers who have expressed an interest, there are very few, if any, that have any experience with special education, where they could be set aside as their own pool of substitute teachers that we would draw from. The other thing that I would add to this discussion after what Mary just shared, I do have still at least 4 special education teachers who have expressed concerns and or needs to engage in discussions about their own personal medical need. Depending on where that conversation falls out, we may certainly have to backfill those individuals, in addition to the 2 special ed teachers that Mary is referencing. Those are things that we have only a few days to iron out.
Charmaine, I really appreciate the transparency on that. The numbers are helpful for me and I think the community to fully understand. So I appreciate you coming clean with those numbers. How are we going? So that's 6 potential spots. And some, I think, of the parents on this call are going to probably say we were short-staffed already with respect to special ed. So how do we plan to address that particular need? And then I'm going to segue into my next question and let you answer both at the same time, which is the ultimate concern is that if we don't have adequate staffing on any particular day, how do we plan on providing those, our unique learners, our special ed students, the appropriate instruction that they are mandated to get under their IEPs?
Very good question. Mary Ford today, Mary Ford and I were looking at what the overall staffing needs would be. I think Mary's just getting into a good place where she's identified how many special ed teachers we would need to address our remote learners while balancing that with the special ed needs that are in our buildings. How do we go about addressing the vacancies? We continue to do like we did today and go through any of those applicants, make calls, and get as many members from our cabinet and/or building principals that could be available to assist us in interviewing candidates that can address that need. The other thing that we have to look at, I know it may not always be the most popular decision, is looking at our existing staff and seeing where we can assist our special ed learners in the building. I know we've talked about on various occasions about some of our members that are supporting our eval teams and our behavior teams. Again, would not be our first choice because they're tasked with getting caught up with many things that are carried over from last year. But in terms of immediately addressing the IEP, those would be individuals, if we could not find anyone to address our needs today, that are within our existing staff qualified to do so. That buys us a little time to figure out how we can support any vacancies that would still exist. Again, that would not be my first choice, but that is, it's what we have within our existing staff that would be able to address our learners with special needs.
So do we, and if we can't fill the gap, are we going to be able to alert parents on a timely fashion to understand where we're falling short? And do we have a plan B?
We have, when you say alert our families, for example.
Well, the special ed families, for example, alerting a parent that their child's IEP was not fulfilled because we're short-staffed. How are we, have we decided how we're going to communicate that to those parents of those children? And what is, is there a backup plan when we're falling short? I mean, I understand you're looking for other people, but I'm nervous that we don't have the adequate staffing here. That just sets us up for a complete failure.
I'm nervous too. While I'm being optimistic, I'm being fully transparent. As far as the special education families, we would have to. You're talking to someone that was a former special educator for many years. So I understand how important that is. Not just because you have families that are showing up who want to know how services will be addressed, but because we are required to also share how we're going to support our gen ed staff that also work with these learners, who should know what the goals and objectives are for these students and the ways they learn best. All of that information is really important to get the students to hit the ground running. My hope and my prayer is that we don't have to have that conversation. Again, we do have staff members, and I know it's not a popular decision, that are within our existing staff that will be able to at least support these learners day one. And I think what Mary Ford, and Mary, you can feel free to chime in, and I will need to spend some time doing tomorrow and or Wednesday, is looking to see where we still stand and what would be best in terms of temporarily identifying anyone or any school that still has a hole or an absence of a special education teacher.
In the interviews we've done to date, I think I'm trying to think of the last 3 interview processes that we went through, we had more than one candidate for every position, so that the schools were choosing someone. In some cases, they may have chosen someone because they had high school experience and didn't choose someone because they had elementary experience. That person is someone we could interview for one of our elementary positions if we had something open up. So we do have people out there that we have looked at but not selected for particular positions that may be very appropriate for other positions. However, if we get to the case, and we've had this in the past a couple times, we had it actually last year when we had a teacher hospitalized and we could not provide the service. If we don't provide this, we can't provide the service to parents, what we do is we let them know that the teacher, in this case, the teacher was hospitalized, and we provide them with some sort of compensatory service for the time that they did not get services provided. In this case, it was 2 weeks. We can either do a monetary settlement with the family where we say, you missed 4 hours and we're compensating you for 4 hours worth of a particular service. Or sometimes if we get somebody on board We can make up the services over the course of the year if there's enough time during the year. So if, for example, it's a speech therapist and one of her students is out sick one day, and it's possible, given the schedule of a child, to pull them for an additional session. Again, we wouldn't do it so that they would miss something important, but sometimes it is possible for them to add a session on a particular day. So we can do some sort of compensating for services that are lost due to a teacher not being available. And we've done that in the past.
Okay. And my last question is with respect to the rate that we're offering our substitute teachers of $110 today, a day. Where do we get that figure? Is that state provided? Is that town provided? Where does that number come from?
It's been the rate. It was the rate that was raised last year. Prior to that, I think we were sitting at $100 a day for quite some time. I believe we are at 110 a day until we hit, 40 days, and then our rate increases.
Okay.
Candidates don't stay there forever, but that's been pretty much our rate, and that's our rate. It's our rate.
Okay, I was just curious as to whether or not, and one, obviously part of this is a BET question, and some of them are probably on whether or not, in order to get the talent that we need in order to come to the schools on a substitute basis, we need to sweeten the pot. Peter, that's all I had.
Thank you. And just to let you know, I believe we have benchmarked that rate historically because we try to remain competitive in the area. So I don't know, Shemaine, you probably have that somewhere in your files. All right, Miss Olson.
Tony, you mentioned that some of our teachers are out sick now. I just have a question about their return, the policy around their return. Are those teachers, when they come back, are they required to show a negative COVID test before entering the classroom, or are they just to be out for 2 weeks?
The Department of Health actually works with them, and I would have to ask that question off the top of my head because they handle the quarantining part. I believe they do have to show a positive test before returning, but let me give you an exact answer by checking with Mary Keller.
I think you meant
okay, and then you'll get back to us with the answer on that. I also just have a more general, I guess, comment or concern. You know, we talk a lot about our disappointment in teachers taking medical leave, but I just don't think it's fair to malign the educators for exercising their rights under their contract, their state and federal law. I noted in the meeting before, in the last meeting, that Greenwich, by doing a full return K-8, we're not following the CDC guidelines with spacing and cohorting. I understand that we're following Connecticut guidelines. I know, Tony, you mentioned that we are following Connecticut guidelines, but the Connecticut guidelines are less safe than CDC. So, it's worth noting, I do realize there's a lot of educators that are, excited and back in the classroom, and there's a lot of educators that are anxious and afraid for medical purposes. So I think it's a mix, and it's worth noting that it's a mix. From what I understand, also there's a short turnaround, very quick window, short turnaround time from when teachers requested remote assignments and when they when the actual beginning of the school year started. Is that correct, Tony?
The ones that requested, it was pretty early in the summer, but we haven't been able to, we're still working on placing people. And that's part of it, is which teachers have changed their mind, which teachers now would prefer to be remote, and they didn't actually, 2 months ago. So Shemaine's had that list of people who are the volunteer list, because first you can't place the volunteer list until she got through all of the medical exemption meetings. And especially when the number was so high, well over 100, you have to get through those first, because those have to be your remote teachers. You want to place those people before you take volunteers.
Right, sorry, I misstated my question. What I meant was from when they were either granted or denied the remote assignment. There was a very short window from when they were either granted or denied the remote assignment, if they requested a remote assignment for a medical reason or medical reason from someone in the family, from when that was either denied from any of them to when they had to make this decision. Should I take a leave? Should I resign? Is that correct?
Shemaine, you might take that because some of them have met with her at least 2 times. She may even have some that have met 3 times. If it was denied the first time, they can actually come back a second time.
So it's important for me to say that teachers fell in 2 different categories per the survey. You had a group of teachers who said, I have concerns and I'm requesting to meet with HR to discuss medical accommodations. And the medical accommodation could be resulting in the need to teach remotely, to keep that person safe, or it could be a variety of things that we can do in person to keep them safe. The second category of teachers were teachers who said, I'm healthy, I'm fine, I'm available and willing to volunteer to be remote should you need me. Now, I have been unable to identify who or select who those teachers would be because we've still been trying to finalize what the remote school options would look like. And we have just reached the point where we've been able to say to teachers that volunteered, because the first teachers to hear if the remote option was even available to them were any of the teachers that were receiving that as an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Legitimate needs, medical needs, preventing them from being in person. That group has heard a long time ago whether or not they would in fact be eligible for that. The largest group are the group of volunteers. And unfortunately, I have not been able to assign them because I haven't had a clear picture of, in fact, how many teachers we would need to staff our remote school. Is that primarily in elementary or secondary? And in all fairness to our teachers, once they do know what their assignment would be, or if they would be selected, their first question would be, and rightfully so, am I going to be able to operate under the assignment that I've had this year? Would I be doing something similar? And that's not always the case. So for that group, we literally have been communicating that with, I would say, from Thursday today to today.
So, and I appreciate that's good clarification, Charmaine. And I think that, so there are some teachers that still are not 100% sure of their assignment. So there could be more than we realize teachers that do ultimately take leave because they're waiting on their assignment. Is that fair to say?
I think that is fair to say.
And then one last question around this. Sorry, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say, I mean, one of our largest groups that we are in the process of staffing are our elementary remote teachers, because that happens to be the largest group of families that have opted for that. The secondary, obviously, the numbers or the need is not the same in terms of comparison. So we were able to work through those a lot faster. It's the elementary that we are still trying to work through, and it's been part of our staffing challenge.
And there are, I imagine, or I think I understood, more teachers, maybe a disproportionate number of teachers requesting remote versus students returning remote. But I think that Tony said there's 22 long-term subs for remote school. So I'm trying to figure that out.
So we have, I think what Tony was saying, and Tony, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there were 22 teachers that would be needed for the elementary option. Is that correct? Is that what you were referencing?
No, those are the 22 long-term subs that are built into the budget. They're actually built in every year. And of those, when we started checking with those, Shemaine, that goes back to your 14 and then only 6 that wanted to return. So we've been working through getting all of the staffing. Also, the other thing with remote that made it a little bit challenging, because as you know, we opened the window for parents to opt out, and they opted out. Then the storm came, so we had to open again, and we had a lot of people change their mind. Yes, I want to do it. No, in both ways. So the numbers also change, and that really matters when you're talking about remote. So it's very fluid. It's taken a lot of effort. And I do want to say, just because it popped into my head, as someone was thanking us, that everybody that's on this screen tonight has worked hours and hours and hours. So it's been a team effort. And and it will be. I mean, we were on a call yesterday, 6:30 Sunday evening. Everyone gave up their evening to talk about staffing. So I just don't want to forget about Mark and Mary and Ann and just all the tech team, everybody that's on this call. So I have to say that so I don't forget.
No, this is far from any typical summer, and we definitely appreciate all the countless hours that you must be putting in. I know you're putting in, and your whole team is. So it's no small feat to do. I've said no small feat before, but this takes on a whole new meaning.
So Megan, just to clarify, just so that we're all clear, of the 22 sections, today I have 15 teachers that we've confirmed that can fill those vacancies. It is a combination of teachers that have volunteered for remote and teachers that would be considered what we would consider a long-term substitute person that is certified and qualified to teach, whether you're backfilling the teacher who's volunteered to be remote and they're in the classroom or vice versa. With that being said, I have to tackle and make sure that we get 7 additional people hired.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. Scher.
I'm sorry, Charmaine, could you repeat that?
Yes.
So
right now,
you need to fill 22 sections, correct?
Correct.
And they're elementary sections, correct?
That is correct.
Because the middle school and the high school, we determined at the last meeting, unless it's changed, students are going to be remote, fully interactive with teachers in the classroom. So that takes care of middle school and high school. If you want it, you'll be piped into a classroom and it'll be like you're in the room. So this is just elementary. And I think we've known for a while, because Tony asked people to declare what you wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need 22 because we set up this separate school for elementary, right? We didn't use the same model that effectively works or may work at the high school and the middle school for elementary. We decided to segment that into effectively two school systems, right? So I heard you say we were 22. I got a little confused because I heard Tony Jones say earlier that it would be staffed by long-term subs. That was the first time I've ever heard that. So, but then I just heard you, and I was about to ask about that because I was like, I must have misheard or somebody misspoke or whatever. You said you have 15 filled. We're supposed to open on the 9th, I guess. So you need to staff 7 more between now and the 9th.
That is correct.
Okay. Of the 15, how many of them were regular classroom teachers last year? And how many of them are long-term subs or something else?
That is a very good question. I do not have that in front of me. I will be able to provide you with that.
Okay.
I'm in Ann's office because I don't know if you all noticed.
Sure, no, I can see. I notice that's not where you are.
So I don't want to misquote, but that's accurate information that I have on my desk that I can certainly give you. I can say this, that of the 22, our goal ideally would be to tap into our classroom teachers that have been here and have had some experience with remote learning and have been deeply steeped in the work over the last couple of days. That is the goal, as opposed to having a full stranger trying to wrap their mind around all of this very quickly. With that being said, Peter,
yes,
the challenge, which is part of the reason that has led us to this discussion, is that there are many, many teachers who volunteer to be on that list that have contacted HR and said, take me off that list. And that then led us to, where are we going to get all of these additional people, prompting the need to get the messaging out that we were going to need extra substitute teachers that would even be available to backfill our classroom teachers who said, I will be there, I will be your remote teacher, so that we don't create another vacancy in a building. That's really what's put us down this path.
Say that part again, Charmaine, the last part about the vacancy in the building?
Yes. So if you, Peter, were the teacher at Riverside who's made the recommendation, who's made the request, the volunteer,
Right.
and be a remote teacher for this school year.
Correct.
And I still need someone to teach in that classroom at Riverside. I'm likely going to fill that vacancy with a long-term substitute teacher that is certified.
Yeah, no, I guess that the math, I realize the math doesn't always work out, right?
Yep.
So, but let's take Riverside, for example. The way this works is we have certain standards for class size. You know, at a particular grade, it's up to 22. If you're in a small school like New Lebanon, you're going to be on the low end of that range, right? Consistently, because there's so few students in that school. If you're at Riverside or North Miami or ISD as an example, you are very, very likely to be at the top of the range. That's just the way the math works out, meaning those classes are likely to be near capacity. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but generally it does work out that way. So let's say we need 4 sections at Riverside for the kids who are in the building, right? But some number of those kids, presumably in the 4th grade, said, no, I'm not in the mix at Riverside now. Now I'm over here in the online school. And I think it was quite surprising to me that Riverside had the lowest number.
That's
you know,
true.
Tony's postulation is, all these kids need to come back, not because parents want it, but also parents need it because they need to work. They need to have some place for their kid to be during the day because both parents are working. The oddest part of the data was the schools that have the highest number of those working parents, so to speak, were the ones that had the highest percentage of people opting for online school by a substantial amount. So I realize the math doesn't always work out, but what I'm trying to get understanding is that presumably we freed up teachers, probably not 100% of what we needed, but we freed them up because we didn't need as many sections when you add it all up, North Street, North Miami, 4th grade, right? And so we had some staff that would have been released from the normal school. What I'm hearing you guys talk about is 2 things which are just puzzling to me. And I think it's puzzling to anybody who works in the private sector. One is we're getting to the end of the road and we're finding out we don't have enough. Okay, that's kind of alarming to me to be finding that out so late. And the second thing that's a little bit alarming to me is ideally you'd like to ask teachers to, pick an assignment where they're most comfortable. But eventually at the end of the day, we don't hire teachers, we hire teachers. And we hire elementary and we hire middle school and we hire high school, and they have a certain skill if it's needed. But at the elementary level, it's wonderful if we can say we guarantee forever that your job is the 2nd grade teacher at the school that you hired in. Eventually you have to say, hey, I really need you to help and put the kids first. I realize this isn't great, but if I don't have a role for you in this building and the role I have for you is over here, what can I do with you to please take this job, right? And it's a little puzzling, I think, to people who are out there. You don't want to be dictatorial, but at the same time, there's an element of this that isn't a democracy. It's here's the job and please help out and educate kids because that's what we need. So this is all a little puzzling to me. And we're so blessed with incredible teachers. I mean, we have unbelievable teachers in this district. It's what makes Greenwich school system excellent. Our administrators are amazing. The board and Havemeyer, I'm not sure we help that much. I'd rather put this in the hands of the incredible principals and the teachers and kind of get out of the way. That's what I'd do if I could be king for a day. I'd let them do their job because they're really good at it. So I guess I'm just a little puzzled by this. And I guess I'm wondering, Charmaine, when do we get to a place, because we're down on it now, where we got to open, we need kids in these schools, and when do we just ultimately say, hey, people, here's the job I need you to do. I'm sorry, please help me.
And I'm going to lean to Dr. Jones. Peter, you said something that I think would be best for her to address, and
Yeah,
that goes to the
I don't need an
sections,
answer.
right?
I don't need an answer. I got it.
Let me just say this, because you mentioned the sections, and at anyone on the call would look at that and say, well, if you do have X amount of kids that are coming out, it should automatically mean that we're able to collapse the section.
No, it doesn't balance perfectly.
To solve our problem, right?
It doesn't balance perfectly.
And to that end, what we have found is that across the board, we just do not have enough to eliminate any of the sections. Which is why, yes, and Dr. Jones can speak to that. Right now, we don't have enough. Yep.
Because we are having to run small class sizes so that we can socially distance and cohort children. When you start putting 3 to 6 feet in between, which is what the American Pediatrics Association says we should be doing, and the state of Connecticut, you can't have any longer 24 or 25 children in a classroom like we would on
that part I could have told you 2 months ago.
Yeah, well, we know that's why we're saying that we had 500 on the first iteration for remote school, then it went up to 700. So you have to be able to staff for 700, and that's
Okay.
that's what we've been working.
I got it. I appreciate your problem. I will tell you, I'm really surprised that I don't even want to talk about this anymore. I'm really surprised that we're finding out here and now that by running this remote school, it is a 100% complete addition. I think that's something we should have known.
It's not 100% addition. That's why
she just said that we're not saving any sections.
It's not about saving money. It's about educating our children and doing the very best that we can. And we started by utilizing the 22 sections that are built into the budget. And now what we're trying to do is, if we have to have additional, that is exactly what we're working on right now. And that number, when it went from 500 to 700, it is a little bit bigger. We still need to hire a few more people, and we will get that done. But yes.
Tony, let me just clarify what she said, because I don't want to overreact to what she said. What she said is we budget a certain number of sections by elementary grade across the district every year,
right,
to run schools normally. That's what we do. Now, what I just heard said is every single one of the billets that were established for each grade across all 11 elementary schools are consumed with regular school. Is that correct?
I would have to go back and actually check when we built the budget exactly.
No, I'm wondering how many we're consuming. Were we consuming the same amount?
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me right this minute, but probably so. We did move if a section was down in one school and it was up in another, like if they had larger numbers and they couldn't socially distance or cohort, and another building it was really low, we moved some staff members from one building to another, which again, we do that every year, but we weren't where we could actually collapse and be able to social distance.
And so the 22 that were needed for remote school are a complete add to what was planned pre-COVID.
They're actually 22, they're like long-term subs that sit in the buildings every year in the budget. They're already built in. That's where we started.
I'm not talking about head count and classes. I'm not talking about budget.
Well, that's where they come from. So if you're trying to say that those positions, yes, they are subs within a building that you can use, and we have 22 of those built in just for elementary. By the time we're said and done, we'll probably have closer to 28 sections when we are finished with remote. So
yeah, so what I'm saying, Tony, and I just don't want to end it here. My question is not about the budget. I want to be exceptionally clear. We must have had a certain hundreds of elementary classes we needed to run, and we have to staff those every year. There were a certain number of those when you add them all up, every grade, every building.
Right.
And what I'm hearing tonight is the ones, we need all of those just to open schools, and we need to add an additional 22 classrooms to run on top of that, to run the remote school.
Yeah, it would be slightly more than that, actually. It'd probably be closer to 28. And those are, but the money to actually, for those, you're taking the 22 existing positions that were built into the budget, and we're not staffing those. And that's where we started the conversation. So yes, it's to run the remote school with 700 students. It's a lot of children. Absolutely.
Okay, Ms. Hirsch?
Thank you. I was gonna say, I assume we probably also didn't know how many sections for the remote school we would need with staffing and teachers until you know, we had the final numbers who was opting out, but that's just me. I don't know. The quick question that I had was, I know you were, I'm jumping back, and this is the last, it doesn't need to be answered now. It's just an idea. When we were talking about subs for special education, I know a lot of the graduate schools for special education in Connecticut, part of their teacher certification requirements are hours of field experience in typical classroom settings and hours with exceptional students, et cetera. So I don't know if it's a possibility that we could reach out to some of those schools and see if any of the graduate students that are looking for teacher certification might be able to step in and apply to be substitutes to get their teaching certification. They may not even, they may be able to offer their services without pay, but I don't really know. Just a thought to put out there, because I know that they come in during our summer schools for ESY and usually offer that. But again, I know that there's a lot of questions that have been asked, and I just thought I'd put that one out there, so thank you.
Ms. Stowe?
Okay, so in conclusion, it was a rough weekend. We were all pretty stressed out. I think that 82% of the community made it very clear they wanted to go back to school on September 9th. Many teachers reached out that they want it. Parents are ready to start going back to work. It sounds like you've solved yet what's been just a lot of hiccups in 5-6 months. So I think that if I could find the silver lining here, because I need to find one, it's that I'm happy, even though it caused some stress, that you're being so transparent with the community, because I think it's important that all 700 people on this call are engaged in this conversation. They know how hard everyone's working, how hard they're working, how important it is for their children to go back to school, for them to go back to work. How much our teachers, when I tell you how many teachers reached out to me over the weekend, they can't wait to be back in the building with these children. Let's focus on that. I really am happy that so many in the community applied. Now we have a bench. So if this happens again, we have a bench. So I think the takeaway from this meeting is that, yes, we took a little bit of a roller coaster ride, but September 9th seems like something we can do. So Peter, can I make a motion?
Well, yeah, I guess if that's it, we can move on to the action item. So why don't you go ahead and make a motion so we can dispense with that.
Okay, so I'd like to move to postpone indefinitely the action on the 2020-2021 school calendar revision, adjusting K through 5 start date item.
And I'll second that to move it along. So basically, for those attending who don't understand, this is to basically not take the item up. We're just postponing it indefinitely. We're not taking any action. As Dr. Jones said at the outset, we're in a position where we can start school next week. Is there any further discussion on that from board members? I'm not seeing any hands. All right, so the motion on the table is to postpone indefinitely the calendar item. Seeing no discussion, I'm going to take a roll call. Bernstein is a yes. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kowalski?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
And Scher. Peter, I think you're muted. Okay, well, I guess he's not available, so that passes 7-0. Thank you. Mr. Kelly, before you make your usual motion, our next meeting is on Thursday at 7 p.m. The board is going to meet in person, those members that are available. We will be Zooming in the community. We're still under the governor's order of 25 people indoors, but we are working towards getting everybody in a room. So with that, Mr. Kelly, do you have a motion to make?
My motion is to adjourn.
I'm going to second that motion so we can get out of here quick. Mr. Bernstein is a yes. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Downey,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Kowalski,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
and Cher. I want to give him the opportunity to adjourn. I guess he wants to stay in the meeting. Well, it's going to pass 7-0. Thank you very much, everybody. And Dr. Jones, I hope you'll get something out to the community as soon as you humanly can.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.